Thank you all for tuning in and for registering for today's virtual program. My name is Martha Osterbiel. I am the Community Engagement at the Maryland Center for History and Culture. And we're so excited to be featuring some of our partners and grantees in today's virtual program. So without further ado, I am going to pass the baton over to my colleague. David Ballou is the Director of Grants and Government Affairs at MCHC and is also the administrator of the Miller History Fund. So David, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Martha, and thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today and everyone else who's logging in for this call. We hope it's just going to be a nice talk where we can learn a bit about what's going on in the heritage sector in Maryland, especially during these interesting times that we're living in. Just a quick update on what the Miller History Fund is. It's really the Thomas V. Mike Miller History Fund. It's a partnership that MCHC has with the state of Maryland where we re-grant out state funds to Maryland's heritage organizations. We typically give out about $200,000 every year for capacity building projects. And it's hard to believe that this is going to be the third year of our program. Right now we have a little less than 20 active grantees that we're working with all around the state. Different types of organizations ranging from local historical societies to community archives and more traditional heritage sites. So a big breadth and scope of different types of history in the state. Today we'll be talking with Vince Leggett, who's the founder and director of the Blacks of the Chesapeake Foundation, Siobhan Hagan, who is the founder and CEO of the Mid-Atlantic Regional Moving Image Archive, or MARMIA for short, and Katie Marshall, who's working on the Lexington Market Public History Project, a coalition of groups including the Market Center Community Development Corporation and her group, Seawall Development, where she is the Director of Communications. So we're going to start off with a quick update from each of our panelists on the different types of programs that we're working on. And I thought we would go ahead and start with Vince. Hi, Vince.
First, just thank you, David and team, for providing us the opportunity to share our wonderful partnership we have with the Maryland Center and specifically with the History Fund, Miller History Fund. The Blacks of the Chesapeake started out as a project in 1984, documenting the contributions that African Americans have made to the maritime and seafood processing industry. In 1999 or somewhere around that time, we actually became a formal foundation, a nonprofit foundation to continue this work. One of the exciting things is that looking at the contributions that the African Americans have made to the maritime and seafood processing industry, normally if you go to public libraries, colleges, or universities and pick up books related to the Chesapeake Bay, very seldom you would see people of color. If they were depicted, the caption would say crab picker and oyster shucker. Well, about 3 decades ago, we started carrying those photographs from the Maryland Archives, National Archives, personal and private collections to fish fries, churches, community events, and laying these photographs out on the table. And people say, that's my mama, that's my daddy, that's my granddaddy. And we began to document and record those oral histories and collect artifacts. And over the years, we've amassed a tremendous collection, over 40,000 images, material records, artifacts, ephemeral memorabilia, and the like. So one of the things that we're doing now is, one, trying to organize this collection and make it not only more accessible to us, because we've had to harvest information from my in-laws, my outliers and attics under beds, paying for storage bins. And so we very well can barely get to the materials ourselves, but we had entered this partnership with the Maryland Archives as well as the Maryland Center to begin to digitize and catalog and organize and write metadata and transferring VHS and cassette tapes into digital formats to try to preserve their shelf life. So this is just a wonderful opportunity to make this as we think, one of a kind or few of a kind collections available to researchers, scholars, teachers, and students. In closing, our collection is organized in 4 different pillars. One is looking at education. At heart, we are an educational group, and we specialize more in informal education, after school summer programs, so we don't have to fight the 9 to 3 educational bureaucracies, which I'm very much a part of. I have a background in K-16 education and a former school board president in Anne Arundel County. So education is one pillar, history is the second, culture is the third, and the environment, because advocacy is a part of our work. And one of the points that David and his team asked us to emphasize is, why is it important this collection gets archived now? And what we would say is, because of the vanishing landscape and the vanishing peoplescape, that if we don't capture these stories now and memorialize these records, a whole aspect of Americana, a whole aspect of life on the Chesapeake Bay would be lost. So that's our sense of urgency. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Vince. We're really excited to hear about that progress as we continue our conversation today. Katie, do you want to jump in and tell us a little about your coalition?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm super excited to be here today, and again, echo the thanks that Vince shared to the Maryland Center for History and Culture. And I had a couple slides because I think this project, to understand where the kind of the catalyst for this project, the Lexington Market Public History Project, was really the redevelopment of the market, which those of us who live in Baltimore, who are from Baltimore, know and love Lexington Market. It is the longest continuously operating public market in the country, founded in 1782, and has always been this kind of epicenter of food culture, food access, and really community gathering in the center of Baltimore City. I'd like to hear Vince talk about the history of the Chesapeake industries, because it was one of the places, it was this incredible epicenter for the agriculture to come south to the city, and goods from the Chesapeake to come in as well. And so I work with Seawall. We are a community development company based here in Baltimore. And back in 2018, we were brought on by the city of Baltimore, who are the owners of the market, through their Baltimore Public Markets Corporation, which has 6 markets spread throughout different neighborhoods of Baltimore City. We were brought on to be the developer to do a $40 million redevelopment of the market, to really prepare it for its next century, serving Baltimore City with modern day infrastructure, and really a very inclusive project plan, which you see some of here. The project plan includes building a new 60,000 square foot market shed building that is really modeled on market sheds of the past, the many building forms that Lexington Market has had. And then this large public plaza that really reconnects Paca and Utah streets in the center of Baltimore City, and has lots of spaces for public events, for arts, and importantly to this project, one of the big outcomes of the work we were able to do through the Public History Project has a like 20 milestone history walk that visitors to the market can kind of go through a journey of the market's history and core themes. So I think my last slide, Martha, just kind of wraps up the project, but to really bring together what this public history project was, and that was enabled by the grant we received, was for us to really dig into 2 major aspects of the history of Lexington Market, to really document its history through a public historian who was able to build the market's first real archive of the market's history, spanning over 200 years, and timeline and a focus on key areas from food access to Black history at the market to the demographics and focus of small business owners at the market. And then the other part of it was a partnership with the Peale Center in Baltimore City to do a really a public storytelling portion of the program to collect 25 audio and visual stories from folks living today who either have a family connection to the market and stories to tell, and as well as customers and vendors and folks who use the market every day and experience it in its current form. And so that's what the project enabled us to do. And it's played out over so many different aspects of the redevelopment that I'm sure I'll share a little bit about in our conversation later today. But
thanks so much, Katie. And Siobhan?
Great, thanks, David. Hi, everyone. I'm Siobhan Hagan from Marmia, and our mission is to provide access to and preserve the movies and sounds of the Mid-Atlantic region, which extends outside of Maryland, but we are based in Baltimore City. So Maryland is our definite focus, and Baltimore City as well. So we have our own moving image and recorded sound collections that we collect and are the caretakers for. The biggest one of those collections is the WJZ TV collection, which is a local TV news station in Baltimore City that broadcasts out to all of Maryland. And then we also do provide services to other organizations in the Mid-Atlantic region. So consulting on audiovisual preservation and archiving, digitization services as well. And for this project, while we are a group of very passionate audiovisual archivists, starting and running a nonprofit was very much a new endeavor for myself and the board members. So we just thought it was such a unique opportunity when we saw the call for, it was the first round of this grant program to ask for capacity building funding. And that was just really integral for our new organization. We were formed in 2016. And I believe we got this in 2018. Time is very weird right now. So it was basically, we knew that we needed to, do more fundraising and bring in more grants and more donations and sponsorships of that kinds of things. But so we didn't know how to do that. So we asked for, and we didn't have any money. So we asked for that capacity building money from this program to hire a consultant to teach us and guide us in fundraising and then also marketing for our organization for the next few years. And can't wait to talk more about it, lessons learned and things like that.
Great, thanks so much. I think that looking at these 3 different projects and, the almost 20 other ones that we've been able to fund over the 2 years of the grant program so far, I think a really big unifying thread is the power of storytelling and stories. So we're excited to talk about that and unpack it a bit more today. And Siobhan, you were mentioning it, how the grant program was really framed as a capacity building program. There are over 200 heritage organizations in the state of Maryland, and we have limited funding to give out every year. And I think we really want the program to be a catalyst for organizations to build their resiliency, to improve their ability to engage the public or steward the heritage that they're entrusted with. So one question I wanted to ask the group, a lot of questions that we get from applicants is what does capacity building mean? Like, what are the goals of the program? And basically, we want to improve the outlook for an organization, 10, 15 years into the future. Is this going to be a tool that is going to have a long shelf life, that's going to build a stronger organization that really has the ability to better connect with its audience? So I didn't know if y'all could talk a little bit about what capacity building meant for you in this project and how the Miller History Grant project you're working on has built the capacity of your organization over the past year or so. So if anyone wants to jump in.
Well, this is Vince. I'll take a stab at it. I know one of the things that was important to us is to put in a strong grants management and financial management system, because as different funders and granting sources do their due diligence, part of the question is, can you handle it? Can you do the reporting? Can you do the requirements? And so for a community-based organization that started as a private initiative and then just grew into a foundation, it doesn't take long to get to that question. What does the bench look like? What kind of partners, what kind of systems do you have in place? And so that was one of the things that we really thought was key, that we have always done grassroots fundraising and ad hoc fundraising. And over the last 30 years, we had used more strategic alliances and partnerships to continue to keep the lights on for 30 straight years. For many people, it's hard to translate that to a balance statement. Sweat equity is good, but the more zeros you ask for, the more accountability that comes with it. So that was really one of the first things that we've really done through this fund, is put together a fee accountant, a best practices financial accounting system to not only manage the grant, but also to show potential givers that we do have a best practice system going in place. And what I've found is, for many people reviewing your management capabilities, it's not the dollar amount, but do you have a system in place that meets people's expectations? So I'll just stop there. That was very key to us before we tried to scan, digitize, catalog anything.
This is a bit of a non-traditional definition of capacity building, but I know for the markets and for Market Center, which is the neighborhood that Lexington Market is located in, and it was the organization that sought the grant. This project helped them to really build a capacity that they hadn't had before, which was this robust archive of both historical documentation and stories that they just had not had in one place. And so the capacity to share that history and integrate it across communication and storytelling and marketing for both the district itself and Lexington Market. I mean, that was the real catalyst for applying for the grant. As we looked at this moment in time, they didn't have an archive or any resources, really comprehensive resources to draw on for this area that is incredibly historic.
Katie, your project's interesting too, because it's a big coalition. It's a partnership project with several different organizations. Have there been any instances where building the capacity of the group, we've been able to rely on the expertise of one organization or make a connection that wasn't there before?
That's a good question. I think definitely in many cases, we really, part of our coalition were the folks from Baltimore Heritage, who are historians. And so they were able to say to us, really help with the organization of the project itself, what we should be prioritizing to use the funding for. And then I think we all at this point with the Lexington Market redevelopment project, we are at the point where we are translating what the archive and the public storytelling collected into physical, basically exhibit materials that are going on that plaza. And that is creating, the first representation of all of this out in the public. And I think it's really forming a model for Market Center in the future, telling the story of Lexington Market as part of this larger Market Center district that's always been a hub for economic activity and local small business. And so we're really hoping that that first work done for the market in its new spaces will then be able to be translated across the other organizations in the coalition, like Market Center and Baltimore Heritage and the rest of the public markets.
Yeah, I think there's just the potential. I think that whatever field you're working in, that there's a potential to get so immersed in your lane and your perspective, and a real benefit of a partnership at working with a totally different type of organization is shifting gears and being able to see a project from their perspective and their angle. And I think that can really unlock a lot of new opportunities that might have been right in front of somebody, but they didn't see before. And I think for Siobhan, your project, that was sort of that opportunity. 2 years as an organization, y'all were focusing on building the archive, and I think for you, maybe the Miller History Fund was an opportunity to work with a consultant, see your organization from a new perspective. I don't know if you can talk about that a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, we were saying this before we went live for this webinar. Well, Vince was saying that a lot of it is of running a small organization, a small nonprofit, is very much like putting out fires, or trying to wrap one thing up and then two things pop up, sort of thing. So having funding come in for this specific project of hiring a consultant around this fundraising and outreach marketing idea, like, helped me to focus anyway, like not just on the putting out fires or like the things that I am, the program part of our mission. But part of that is like building a sustainable organization so we can keep doing our mission. So that was where having the dedicated time, the money there, that was just, that was able, then I was able to like focus and be like, this is, although some days it felt like a fire I needed to put out because I was having like tons of meetings with the consultant at first and things like that, which is all part of the plan. But it just was like forcing this next step in our growth and in our knowledge. I mean, our entire board got really great training from the consultant, and just being able for me too to just like chat with this person who's had way more experience in fundraising and just nonprofit management. Just being able to have that person on call for me for like a year or two was amazing. And I'm regularly finding myself quoting the consultant, either to myself and to other people. So yeah, it was really opened up a lot of knowledge for me and the board. But then also like it just helped focus our brains and energy and time on this one specific need.
Well, I feel like I've always been a big fan of your Instagram account, so I feel like I've seen some of the tactics and ideas from the consultant in effect, and it's been great to see.
Yes, totally. Thank you.
Check it out. Maybe we can drop a link later on in the chat. So for most of you, I think Vince is the exception. The first round of Miller History Fund proposals, well, back then it was called the Pathways Program. We changed the name. They were due in December of 2019, if I'm remembering correctly. And we announced the award winners, I think, a few weeks after the COVID-19 pandemic had really shown itself for the magnitude of what it was as a disruption to our daily lives. And a lot of you had to shift and adapt and try and realize these projects in a very different setting than you had initially conceived when you wrote the proposal. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that journey went, if there was any benefits or challenges. And, in some ways, our new virtual world has made connecting easier, and in other ways, it's made it more challenging.
I'll dive in again. I would say, in addition to putting together some financial infrastructure, we had our website redesigned. It really became our public interface, and created e-commerce. I mean, as you say, the last 18 months, everybody is zoomed out, working from home. No one's going anywhere. People have money to spend. And so we created an e-commerce account where people can support our work electronically. We're on an SD store, but it's almost like the Blacks of the Chesapeake has been out on the bay for 30 years, working in the deep end and the shallow end of the bay. And with these funds, it's almost like cut the lights on an aircraft carrier. I mean, all of a sudden, hidden in plain sight, because we've been doing the work, we've building trust with community. And that's one of the things I would really say, that we have been able to showcase more aspects of our work, providing people opportunities to communicate with us. In the last 60 days, we've dealt with Al Roker's office out of New York, CBS, NBC. I mean, just the lights have come on, and at least we have ways that people can access us, share ideas, share connections. And it really shows us that there's demand out there, but with demand, it comes responsibilities. And so again, we're just trying to position ourselves where we're able to respond timely and professionally to the demand that's being created.
I love the maritime analogies. Very fitting. Katie?
Briefly from our end, like I think on every aspect of like the redevelopment project and including like the public history project, which was running concurrent. Yeah, we received the grant, I think literally in February, March of 2020. And we just had to be more patient, and especially for the component with the Peel Center where we were going to talk to people in person. We provided ways for folks to call in and share their stories, but we all know that like having someone interviewing and really guiding stories out of folks is the best. We just had to be more patient with the time it was going to take, and making sure folks were comfortable with the format as well. And so, you know, we did, and it really still yielded great stories, and now that we're able to use them across the project, it didn't really mess with any of the timeline for the redevelopment and using any of the material.
I think one change that I noticed, and I'm curious if it's going to be sustainable, is this sense that people had at the onset that they were living through history. I think people felt this compulsion to document the times that they were living in when COVID first happened, and with a lot of other just big upheavals in our country, like there's a sense that we're living through history now, and I'm wondering if people feel more compelled to share their stories today than they might have been a few years ago.
I think there's a large amount of nostalgia, like people have maybe brought on a little bit by all our time just by ourselves.
Yeah, I'm excited. You know, I'm excited to be in a crowded market again.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
I know for me, one of the aha moments have been that over the 30 years, we've worked with a lot of historic photographs and images from the National Archives, the Maryland Archives. We've collaborated with Marion Warren, who was a well-noted Chesapeake Bay photographer with National Geographic, the Aubrey Bodine collection. And so for the last 30 years, we've been documenting African-American life on the Chesapeake Bay in the last 30 years. By work with the Maryland Archives, they've helped me see, well, Vince, 50 years from now, the work that you're documenting is going to be such a contribution to history, to literature. And so being in the moment of it, you don't have that sense. But when you're dealing with an institution like the Maryland Archives, that's been around since 1630 something, they've helped me take a longer view. And that's really been very profound for me. And a lot of times it's not whether it's a pretty picture, but did it capture a slice in time that you had to be there. And again, just helping me better understand history and humanities and arts and genealogy. It's just so many aspects to the work that I was busy trying to rescue artifacts, and 30 years ago, I was interviewing people who were 70 years old, 30 years ago. So I was more in doing the work and not building the empire. And so it's just changed my orientation, I would say.
Yeah, I definitely think the pandemic, it, especially since there was initially like a lot of people were like, oh, this hasn't happened since, 1919, and looking back in order to see some sort of hope for the future. It's made it a bit easier in some ways to convey what we do, and for people to understand why, their voice and their archives and a regional archive would be important to keep and document, because it's like, oh, in April of 2020, looking back at a fundraiser we had in October of 2019, it was like, oh my God, life has changed so much. And I have this like cell phone video of it that I can look back on. And so it created some opportunities to connect more, at least to, do that outreach component of like, here's what we do. I feel like that's a lot of what I spend my time doing, is explaining to folks like what we do and why. So I feel like that was a little bit easier. And then as far as the project goes, I mean, we had initially planned for meeting the board to get the training, and to, for me to meet with the consultant one-on-one in person multiple times over the course of like 6 months to a year. And it was more like 6 months, really. We were gonna like kind of just get it done. But then we just, moved everything to Zoom and phone calls. And I think that made it, that extended it a bit more. Like we just needed training, it's like you need a little bit more time to do that. I don't think you absorb as much, or maybe there's just more other distractions going. Well, and of course there's more distractions because of the world, and like living through a lot of this like constant stress and trauma. So, and then I think it just required us to actually spend more time on the project than initially planned. But then we still had the same outcomes of getting the training, and getting the reports from the consultant. So it changed it slightly, probably just made us have to commit more time.
Yeah, I guess what I'm curious about too is how sustainable these changing perspectives are going to be over time. Like right now, we're all convening on Zoom in this virtual format. A lot of the stories that Vince or Siobhan are collecting and stewarding through the organizations are from, a pre-digital era. And when you're talking about oral histories that like Katie and Seawall are working on with Market Center, that's memory. That's a totally different type of format and how that's being collected. So we'll see how all these interactions and happenings that we're in now are going to be preserved or perceived 20 or 30 years down the road. I didn't know if we could share like a few unexpected discoveries or connections that might have come about as a result of the project. We talked a little bit about how COVID-19 had to shift some of our strategies for meeting and for connecting with people, but there's also the fun, unexpected things that happen during a project, whether or not it's like a particular story that you thought was really touching or moving, or a new strategy for fundraising that you learned.
I'll jump in just to get it started. I guess that one of the profound things I really found, particularly the Maryland Archives has served as our partner. Their special collections, digitization, the whole leadership of the Maryland Archives have supported the project. And I just thought that the photographs that we've collected and shot, many of ourselves or got from private collections, was the centerpiece of our work. And when the Maryland Archives staff did a vulnerability assessment of the collection, they concluded it was the oral histories, cassette tapes, VHSs that they saw that were more in peril, that even though we didn't have climate control or the best practices conservation-wise, somehow our collection was in reasonably good condition, but they prioritized getting a lot of the VHS cassettes and things digitized because of the magnetic transfer process of that media that was really more vulnerable. And I kind of dropped my head when they gave me the analysis of the patient, but I yielded to their expertise. And so I guess that was just a part because I really didn't quite understand the archival world and how to preserve and best practices. And that really, again, it changed my whole perspective. And that's how I met Siobhan. She is the queen of that stuff.
As far as like unexpected discoveries, I guess I won't say it was like unexpected, but it was, well, I will just say a big focus of the history project, and like one of the themes that we asked the historian to really dive in on, because my organization, Seawall, had done about 2 years of community engagement leading up to the project around all aspects of the project, including people's memories and things that they wanted to see represented in the market. And something that we had heard was that there had been elements of the slave trade happening at Lexington Market in Baltimore City. And we could not, on our very rudimentary non-historian searching, find sources of that, but we said to the historian, this is something that we need to dig into and find out what those origins are, what those stories are. And so he ended up uncovering kind of 2 specific stories that were documented, one in the Baltimore Sun and one in a publication that's no longer around, of one situation where a man was a runaway. Had run away from where he was enslaved, and his like identifying factor was that he had been a vendor in the market, or he had been there selling for his enslaver. And so they said, maybe he'll be around Lexington Market, or you might know him from Lexington Market. And the other one was an actual sale of a woman, and they said that they would meet outside of Lexington Market. And so we found those, and that was, just really important to kind of say this, it was the presence of the slave trade as it can be documented at Lexington Market. And it really, actually, in a cool way, is now going to be a very permanent part of the market, because we also at the same time we're running a large public art process to select artists to do 2 permanent pieces of public art on the new public plaza, big large sculptures. It has a $300,000 budget through a number of organizations. And so one of the artists who applied was a local Baltimore artist named Aletha Devane, who's really known for her art that shows all aspects of Black life and Black history. And when she applied, she asked us specifically about the history of the slave trade at Lexington Market. And I said, well, let me share with you everything that the historian has uncovered. And she ended up, the piece that she'll do that'll sit at the main entrance to the public plaza on Utah Street, will acknowledge those 2 individuals who are named Robert and Rosetta, who were the 2 individuals referenced in those stories that the historian uncovered, and really acknowledge them. And it's a really beautiful piece that shows their profiles. And so that was just a very unexpected and really cool, felt right kind of outcome of the project, and will be there now for a long time.
Yeah, so I just want to say, Vince, that you said something that I feel like is like a bumper sticker for this program and like life. I yielded to their expertise. Yeah, it's just like, that's what I did. And I mean, you work with a consultant, you tell them you communicate, engage so much, and then they give you feedback, they give you these assessments, and their expertise, and a lot of it is yielding to it, but also like incorporating it and making it align with your values and your priorities. So that probably one of the main thing that I yielded the most to, so it was the biggest takeaway for me, was that the consultant made me realize and said, like, you need to stop operating from this poverty mindset, which I absolutely was like, oh my gosh, yes, I am, like in all areas of my life, because, you know, you work in archives, libraries, museums, nonprofits. I think a lot of folks just, it's like, we're public servants, we're doing this for our mission, but we shouldn't, that doesn't mean that we should be broke. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't value ourselves financially. Like, these are businesses, they're nonprofit and, you know, tax exempt businesses, but they're businesses, and you can make a profit. You don't have to lose money to be a not-for-profit, you know. So that was like the biggest takeaway, that was really inspiring, encouraging, and also terrifying at the same time, because it really kind of messed with some of my built-in ideas that I think need to get like torn down.
Really wonderful, thank you. Katie, your story about the public art project being informed by the history and how that's going to be visible at the market longer term, I think it's a good segue into the next part of our talk that we wanted to do. And you know, a lot of times when we think about public history or iconic heritage sites, we're thinking about the built environment, or we're thinking about really visible public festivals or things of that nature. And I think a unifying thread with all three of these projects is that it's a little more of hidden history. It's either collections that, you know, might have been in a repository for a while and are just now getting digitized, or you know, people's personal stories that they've kept throughout their lives. And I'm wondering if we could talk a bit about how collections can help build a sense of community. And I think in Katie's instance, you know, it was the artist was acting as a mediator. And I think in a lot of cases, the Heritage Organization is a bit of a mediator when it comes to making these collections accessible and making them visible to the community. So if anyone wants to take a stab at the efforts we have to take to really unlock the potential of collections to build a sense of place, to build a sense of togetherness.
Well, one thing I would say is that with Blacks of the Chesapeake, I mean, who we are and what we're focused on is in the jingle. It's Blacks of the Chesapeake. And when you look at African-American life on the Chesapeake Bay, some aspects of it we celebrate, some aspects of it we commemorate. And I think that both of them have different purposes. What we try to do through Blacks of the Chesapeake is every day looking for something extraordinary that's African-American has done on the Bay to smash many of the stereotypes that underserved, limited resource people don't care about their environment. And so we showed that African-Americans were sail makers and boat builders and owners of seafood processing plants and pilots guiding commercial tankers up and down the 200-mile stretch of the Chesapeake Bay, looking at STEM and STEAM and science, technology, and education. So we try to tell a broad story, but a story of resiliency, and sometimes drawing a line of demarcation between commemoration and celebration. I think that in light of the social justice movement that we've all been immersed in over the last 24 months about equity, diversity, and inclusion, it has to be more than a jingle. But again, trying to give agency and voice to people. And so a big part of our work is how do you take the spoken word, the oral tradition, and connect the dots with primary records, courts records, property inventories, and other modes of documentation that the system says has more value. I mean, so often people take the position that if George Washington didn't sleep there, it's not important. We take the position, let's see who did sleep there. What is their story? What were their contributions? What were their disappointments and setbacks? And so again, just trying to nuance what's important and what's significant as my book title, Through Ebony Eyes, looking at the view from my window. And I'll ask Martha if some point she can put our website link up in the chat, and so people might get a chance to see some of the things I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think preserving and sharing those stories and really encouraging a connection between your audience and those stories is so critical. And I'm thinking of the Lexington Market project, where the building is completely changing, right? Is it the built environment of Lexington Market that makes it special, or is it the stories and associations that people have with it?
Yeah, you like took my talking point. So we talk about this like all the time on this project, that the building, in a way, and developers saying this, we are very happy to say this, but it's not what we normally say. Like, the building is the easy part. What is the most important and the hardest part in many ways is that spirit of Lexington Market that has really been transcendent of any building. I mean, Lexington has had so many buildings and iterations and locations, even among these multiple blocks or here over the past 200 years. But how do you bring that spirit into a new building? And I think the history is a huge part of that. And in a way, we saw the history both in its like physical role in the market, and then how it's interwoven among the vendors. There's many legacy vendors who are moving over to the new market. That it needs to be this kind of like undercurrent that allows people to have a Lexington Market experience in the new market, which is different for everyone, but that it can't be a space that all of a sudden doesn't feel like it's for a certain population that's always utilized the market. That to us, we heard again and again from community, and we knew that couldn't be lost. And so it's everything from how is the history integrated to little things like what artifacts of the market are preserved and then brought over to the new market, what quirky signage is our vendors bringing over. Like it's all those things that add up to create a Lexington Market that feels like Lexington Market, even though it's in a new building.
Yeah, I think it's like of course the building is important, and like preservation of that and the memory of that, or at least the image of it, so important. But yeah, it's how people move in and out of it. It's how people interact with the space, and that is like the most unique elements. And like actually to tie these projects together too, like I know that the historian that was working on the Lexington Market project contacted us for footage to see if we had any documentation of people moving through, and like what were the sounds of the market and like things like that at least in different times, which we do have some from the 80s, which could be fun for some folks to relive. And so I feel like as far as like community, not just for physical spaces, but as everyone's already said, I mean, humans are just all about our stories and our having our stories told, and I think for communities to think about the preservation of their stories and their voices that live on beyond their physical being, there's a sense of legacy and importance that goes along with that, whether we're talking about collections that reside at an archive, with big quotes of like a big organization versus a community archive, versus something that's maybe pulling from other organizations, and then personal archives too. Like these all matter, and by going through and conducting these archival actions and creation of oral histories, it's empowering those communities by saying you're important, your story matters, not just right now, but for as long as we can possibly tell these stories, and we're going to help you to preserve them. I think that is empowering for more people to tell their stories and to share and to like get to know each other. So I think it's probably, I'm biased of course because this is what I do, but I think that that's one of the most powerful ways for us to like convey ourselves and our identities in our community.
I know hearing Katie talk, I mean, I describe myself as a country boy out of East Baltimore. I mean, I grew up in Baltimore. Lexington Market was a part of our experience, riding the buses. And it was something about the way the old ladies carried a shopping bag. I mean, it's an art to toting a shopping bag from Lexington Market. I mean, the bus drop you off and you still got 8 blocks to walk. I mean, I could barely, my wife sends me up there to get collard greens. I barely can put the bag of collard greens in my limousine, let alone ride a bus and walk 8 blocks. And so, Katie, I'm going to talk to you offline. We're going to have to talk about hands. Hands is part of the heart of Lexington Market.
Amazing. I can't wait.
I think what's key to all of this is that it took like a person or a group of people to decide that we needed to save that story and we need to preserve it. And it took the historian on your project to like uncover that new aspect about Lexington Market or whatever else it might be. And I think that just really highlights the importance of this network throughout Maryland of 200 different heritage organizations that are working with the resources that they have to save this heritage and save these stories for the next generation. We're really grateful to the late Senate President Mike Miller for helping us establish this program, and then we're just so grateful to all of the applicants every year that are doing this amazing work. Sometimes it can be thankless and it's hard, and we were talking earlier before we got on the webinar about some of the projects that Vince and Siobhan were working on. I said, well, what are you doing for fun this weekend? And the answer was, we're working on writing other grant proposals, and we're working on, the next opportunity for our organization. It really takes passionate people, and it really takes well-supported organizations to make this possible for everyone. So we're hopeful that the funding that we give out every year can be a catalyst for, recognizing those people's work and building that network. We just have a few minutes left. So if anybody wants to, yes, and it takes money. And if you have a question, just please leave it in the Q&A, but I thought maybe our parting words could be a few words of advice to any of the Miller History Fund applicants that are going to be going for this next round, which, so everyone knows, the letters of intent are due on Friday, November 12th. So
I would just say, why is it important? I think that what I learned, because the first time we applied, we were close but didn't make the cut. We dusted ourselves off. We took the feedback from the reviewers, from David and his team. We talked with our team, and the whole area of why now? I mean, it's always more people competing if they have resources. And so if there is a sense of urgency, please, I would tell potential grant seekers, speak to why now, because we had a 7-hour work session on why now and distilled it down to 350 words, because they only give you a limited number of words to say why now. So you have to choose your words wisely, or the template will say too many words. So I think that making a case of why now, I think is something that proper attention should be given to, because there's a lot of projects competing.
Just go for it, because I will say I do not come from this world traditionally, but it was so clear to me after 2 years of working on the Lexington Market project that like the history was such a major component of the project, once we started talking about this with the folks who ended up being in this group that applied for the grant funds, it was everyone's priority. It was top of mind for them how that would be incorporated, and so to have, you know, something like the Miller Grant to go for, and the support of, you know, it was amazing. It was amazing for us to build a coalition of folks who did know this world and knew how this project should be organized. And I can't like speak highly enough of the people who we worked with, both from Baltimore Heritage and from the Maryland Center for History and Culture. But that really finding like your people to go for it with was like what it took for us. So
we always encourage partnership grants. So we give special consideration to those. That's some good advice.
Yeah, and to me, I think probably I would say put in some buffers for yourself. So time, if you think it's going to take a certain amount of time, what's the harm in just maybe stretching that out a little bit? As I recall, and maybe it's changed, there's a large time frame for this project, right? It's still 2 years, I think. So utilize that. Like, you don't have to make everything happen right away. And I just think for your own sanity, especially if you're starting something that you're not as familiar with, which I think this is all pushing us out of our comfort zone a little bit, like add that time buffer for your own sanity, because that's really important. And then also a money buffer as well, if you can, within your budget. One of the things I think I wish I had done is kind of planned a bit more, instead of it just being like money that comes in that goes out to a consultant. If there was some way to also like pay us for our time, or at least like our staff to who would then take over and like do the work that I would have been doing, but I now had the time for that. So if it's possible, obviously talk to David about how, you know, what will be fundable and what wouldn't be, but just kind of, you know, don't operate from the poverty mindset. Like, I just felt like, oh my gosh, we're already asking for all this money. But like, pad in that money, pad in that time for your own well-being.
Self-care. We could have a whole webinar just on that in the heritage field. So I don't think we don't have any questions. We do have some nice comments in the chat. People want to connect with you further, Vince. Are very excited by your work. But I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Like I said earlier, we're moving towards some due dates for the third cycle of the grant program. Next Thursday, we'll be having a webinar that really goes into the nuts and bolts of the application process, what's eligible, what's ineligible. So that'll be Thursday at noon, same bat time, same bat channel. But thanks so much, and I'm just really happy to be able to talk with you all today, and it's great to be in a state that has so many great heritage stewards and organizations trying to do this important work.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.